G'day guys, and welcome back to the Boundary Riders Podcast. Now today we're going to be talking about the round that was a massive round with Port Adelaide and Collingwood probably being the match of the year. We saw Carlton smash West Coast, which wasn't really that surprising. Brisbane beating Geelong and also Sydney giving themselves somewhat of a chance towards finals. But it was a great round, and I think we will start off with, we probably don't have too many big news topics to talk about, so I think we'll just get into the games in a minute. But I think I just want to mention at the start the game of the year, which I saw a little bit of because I was watching the Swans game, unfortunately. But it was such a great game, the Port Adelaide versus Collingwood one. So many people have talked about it. Port Adelaide, in my opinion, lost no fans from that performance. They were brilliant, but they just got pipped to the post by a team who has just proven time and time again that they just can't be beaten if it's a close game. They've just been massive. Collingwood this year, they are outright favourites now as the premiership team, as the team to beat, really. And to be honest, I don't know if many teams can stop them. I do think the Port Adelaide were very good, and I think they are one of the few sides who can compete with them if it gets really close, because I think Port Adelaide match up with Collingwood very nicely. But when it gets too close, if Jamie Elliott's got the ball in his hand, you can just see how clutch he really is. He was brilliant in that game and is arguably in All-Australian form. I think he should be talked a little bit more about making the All-Australian team. I think he hasn't been talked about enough. I think it's been a little bit overshadowed by a couple of other small forwards in the competition like Charlie Cameron, but Jamie Elliott's been very consistent this season, and he's just suddenly showing how much potential he's had throughout the majority of his career with a lot of injuries that he's had. But I think we'll just get straight into the review of round 19, and it was a very big round for a lot of clubs. A lot of teams have been moving around the table, and now we can really set up to see who can make the finals now, because a couple of teams that were up there did tend to lose, but it looks like they should be safe to make it in the end. I think that's probably the Bulldogs. They did get a good win against Essendon, but now Essendon are teetering on the edge. We've got teams like St Kilda who just got a win against North Melbourne. Well, it was only a couple of hours ago. I'm actually doing this on a Sunday now. We also saw Richmond just get over the line against Hawthorn. Some big games. We'll review them all right now, though, because there were just some massive games. And we'll start all the way back on Friday night with Bombers versus Bulldogs. Big game for both clubs. The Bombers, I think, were pretty much favourites. However, the Bulldogs have a very good record against the Bombers, which I actually didn't realise until there was a little bit of talk in the pre-game for that game. It was a pretty close game up until about half-time, but then the Bulldogs just found something, and they got a really good win in the end. They won by 41 points over Essendon. Massive win for them. I think that's pretty close now to them securing the top 8 spots, because they've got a pretty good run home, in my opinion. Next week, they do have the Giants, so they're in really good form, but they do have them down in Ballarat, so it's going to be a really big game for both of them as well. Essendon, though, this is very disappointing the last 2 weeks against Geelong and Bulldogs, both teams that they they need to be beating to be making finals, and they've been beaten very convincingly in both of those games. So we'll go to the 3-2-1 votes now. 3 votes go to Marcus Bontempelli, the 2 votes went to Tom Liberatore, and the 1 vote went to Bailey Smith. I think Bailey Smith needs to be playing in the midfield now. I know there's been a lot of talk about him potentially moving on at the end of the year. I don't really see it. I think that he may... I'm going to take the benefit of the doubt and say it was illness. I'm not going to be one of those people who say he wasn't ill at all. I don't know the extent of Bailey Smith's injury or whatever, but I'm going to take them on face value on that front. Luke Beveridge breaking his hand, I feel a little bit more skeptical on. I don't really think you smashed your hand on a whiteboard, bro. I think you would have had to have hit it really, really hard and broken it in two, and I don't know. I just don't trust that one. But nonetheless, he was very good in this one, Bailey Smith, and I think now he has to just be in the midfield for the Bulldogs. I think he's just built for that sort of position, and I think he's one of the few Bulldogs midfielders who does have that a lot more burst pace. Other than Bontempelli, I think that, and even Bontempelli is quite a slow midfielder. They've got Liberatore in there, Treloar, they're all one pace. I think Bailey Smith does give them a little bit of a different look in there. So hopefully he stays in there for the rest of the year for the Bulldogs fans out there. And yeah, I think it was a very good performance from them, but they need to continue this sort of form as well. They can't just fall off the way they have a lot of this year as well. After that, we get to Saturday afternoon. This was Richmond versus Hawthorn, and Hawthorn, look, it's a little bit unlucky for them because they are such a young side, but when they're in that position with a 5 to 6 goal lead in the third quarter and let 5 goals go in a row in the last quarter to nothing, it's not good enough in my opinion. I think that was very poor from Hawthorn. And Richmond, they got away with it. I'm going to give them that. I don't know if they make finals because they They do have the draw on their hand, but the thing is with the draw, there's a couple of teams in that top 8 now who are pushing for the 8, like Geelong and Carlton and even Sydney to an extent, who have a draw. And the draw may not actually be that big of an issue right now. It may be percentage on those teams, because those teams fighting for that spot, it may work out on percentage. And the teams like Sydney and Carlton and Geelong have a very good percentage, while Richmond have really wasted it in the past few weeks. And I'm not saying they should have got percentage off this game, but to them to only just survive by 1 point, I think they got very lucky in the end. We'll get to the votes now. 3, 2, 1. The Tim Taranto got the 3 votes. James Sicily got 2, and Jack Graham got 1. Tim Taranto was brilliant in this game. He kicked a couple of goals as well, including one in the final quarter. He has been very good this year. He's been a bit quiet in the past fortnight or so, but he definitely bounced back in this game. And I think he got Richmond over the line in the end. He was definitely one of the few contributors, especially in the first half. But definitely rose to the occasion, and definitely one of the big reasons why they got him to the club in the off-season. James Sicily with the 2 votes. He's been brilliant this year. And Hawthorn looks like so much more of a better side when he's in the lineup as that defender. He just holds them so well back there. And it's a little bit disappointing that they did lose in the end, because I think he would have got 3 votes if they did hold on. But in that last quarter when they just got overrun, he couldn't stop it. And if he wasn't able to stop it, then no one was really going to be able to. But Richmond do keep their finals hopes alive with that win. And, they got a good win against Sydney a couple of weeks ago. They are doing well, but they have to win these games. And, I mean, that's all they had to do in that one. And they got their job done. So I guess that's all they can really ask of Richmond out there. But they got very lucky in the end. And I think that's not really a surprise to many. After that, we get to Carlton versus West Coast. Look, I'm not going to spend so much time on this game because, look, Charlie Kerner got 10 goals. That's brilliant for him. But you weren't even playing a real defender. You had to have Oscar Allen sent down there on you as a forward because they had no height. You were playing against a VFL-worthy defence. I'm sorry, but you should be kicking 10 goals in that game, Charlie Curnow. And I'm not going to be sitting there and saying, not to take credit away from Carlton. I'm more than happy to take away credit from Carlton. Good on you for beating one of the worst teams we've seen in about 15 years. That was a good win. Good on you. You got a 71-point win. But don't exactly claim it as a massive win for Carlton or they're in some massive form, because they beat Port Adelaide at their worst last week. They've beaten a couple of really low teams and they beat West Coast. So, I don't know. I just don't see Carlton really as much of a team this year. They've got a couple of hard games coming up, so I think they may make the finals on the fact they've got a soft draw. But honestly, at this point, West Coast almost need to be taken out of the competition because it's so unfair for teams who have got them twice, because they just get a huge percentage boost from them. And you can see even, other than Sydney, you've seen a lot of teams this year who have them twice. Essendon are going to have them twice. Carlton and Adelaide as well. They're all teams fighting for those final spots. So it's really unfair to teams like the Gold Coast, St Kilda, and those sort of teams around there as well that don't have them, because they don't get that chance to get that easy percentage boost or whatever. So I think it's just really disappointing. And West Coast are just an absolute ravel of a side right now. So I'm not really too impressed by Carlton beating them by nearly 70 points. I'm not really impressed with that at all. And good on Charlie Curnow for taking advantage of it. But again, you weren't playing anyone. So don't be walking around like you're bloody top shit, because you may win a Coleman this year, but you've got 19 goals against one side. That's not exactly fair for everyone else. But let's move on to the next game, which was a little bit more interesting. Brisbane versus Geelong. Brisbane were very good in this game, but they didn't take their chances and they didn't put a lot of pressure on the scoreboard against Geelong for the majority of this game, and they almost let Geelong steal this one. They were very good in the end to hold on, but Geelong were very bad in the first 3 quarters. And Jeremy Cameron got 3 goals in this game, and 2 of them were basically gifted to him. So, look, like I said last week when they beat North Melbourne, I think it was, I don't really trust Geelong yet, and I still don't trust them. Against the top sides, they haven't performed as well, and they've had a pretty soft run in the past couple of weeks, and I don't really see them as a side that's going to be doing much in finals. Who knows? Maybe they will if they can get there, and they've got the experience to back it up, but they're not playing anywhere near as good as what they were last year. And for them to only get 7 goals and only had about 1 till about halfway through the third quarter, they are not a team that I think is going to compete very well this year. But nonetheless, we get to the votes. 3, 2, 1. The 3 votes went to Kitty Coleman. The 2 votes went to Lachie Neale. And the 1 vote went to Calamarchi. Now, Coleman was actually very good off halfback. And I think that he actually was came out late in the game, which I didn't really hear much on the commentary because I was watching this game on the stream. There wasn't really talk about it, but it did say at the end of the game when you looked at the stat sheet that he was out. So I was a bit surprised by that, but he was very good off halfback. He was one of the few players in this game that were actually using the ball quite well. Lachie Neale was good as always. Don't have to say too much about that. But I wanted to talk about Callum Archie, because he was brilliant in this game, and he kicked a late goal to really just break the gap open, just did a little bit more to keep Geelong at bay. And he was actually, this is probably his best game of his career, Cal Archie. And he's been at a lot of clubs. He's been at the Gold Coast. Maybe he's only been at the Gold Coast. But he was very in and out of that side. And for him to move to Brisbane, he's probably been in and out of them, but they've now trusted him. And he played brilliantly in this one. So I had to give him full credit for that. He was brilliant and arguably really helped them in the final quarter to get him over the line. After that, we get to Sydney versus Fremantle. Now, I watched this game. I was watching the Swans one. I was really annoyed this was on at the same time as the Port Adelaide Collingwood game. But nonetheless, Sydney were very good. And I don't know if many people have talked about this, but I swear to God, Sydney had someone midweek to go over and teach them how to kick a set shot. Because the set shot goal kicking from players like Will Hayward, who's been terrible all year, Buddy Franklin, who hasn't been that good for the majority of the year, a couple of others as well, they had their whole build-up to their lining up for goal all changed. They were all calm. They all take a deep breath. They kick straight. And let's be honest, if Sydney didn't kick straight in this game, they had the potential to lose because they weren't that good in the second half. I mean, Fremantle came to this game in the second half. Let's just put it that way. Now, in the first quarter, Fremantle lost again. They haven't been very good in the first quarters this year. I think they've only won 2. And in the end, because Sydney won by about 4 goals, it basically was the game breaker for the whole game. Sydney had them at bay to about 4 goals for the majority of it. And to be fair, Sydney, for the majority of the year, have been held up by their young players like Errol Goulden and the likes. But this game was actually held up by a lot of their veterans. Luke Parker was brilliant. Callum Mills was pretty good. Buddy Franklin was almost of old. And I've got to give credit to Buddy Franklin. The fact that he's played the last few weeks a lot more selfless football and is knowing now that he's probably going to retire and not have to hold that forward line anymore. He has taken a little bit of a backward step and has told himself that he doesn't have to run for every ball. He has to lead just to give his other teammates a chance. And I think that's really unselfish footy and really good to see from him. And I think it gets our other tall forwards into the game. But Fremantle, I don't know what happened 4 or 5 weeks ago. They had a brilliant 6-week patch and then it just lost it and fallen into a ravel. And now that they've only won 4 games at home this year out of I think 9. And I don't think anyone would have said at the start of the season that Fremantle would not be winning games at home. So they've got to regroup in the start of next season because if they don't, I think Justin Longmuir's job is a question. I don't think he will be talked about this season because I think that they've got the list to compete next year. Not really I don't know if they can compete. Maybe they have to do some moves in the off-season because their midfield is still a bit thin and their forward line is still a bit thin as well. But I think they can still build a list and make a push towards the finals next year. But he will be in question if they don't. Midway through the year, if they're in this point, I think that his job will be a question. But we get to the 3-2-1 votes. 3 votes went to Luke Parker. Cal Mills got the 2 votes and Lachie Schultz got the 1 vote. Luke Parker hasn't really been that much talked about this year because a lot of the young Swans have really stood up, like Chad Warner and Errol Gordon, like I mentioned before. But Luke Parker was the player of old this game. He was brilliant. Played a massive role inside the middle of the ground and kicked a goal, I believe. Maybe he didn't kick a goal, but he was very good in the midfield and definitely led from the front. Cal Mills with the 2 votes. He was brilliant, as he always is. Has been a little bit down on his form this year. Obviously had an injury mid-season. But he's came back and is playing some really good footy, and hopefully towards the end of the year to maybe the start of next year, he really bounces back to that form that he had last year. And the 1 vote went to Lachie Schultz, and I think he got 4 goals in this game. He has a really good record against the Swans, had a really good game earlier in the year when he played against them, and he kicked a third of their goals. He was very good up forward, Lachie Schultz, and kept them in the game in that last quarter when they were starting to make a bit of a push. Now, I know Derm said it about 60 times on the commentary, but he's a footballer. He's not exactly one of those runners who's going to be running all day like a Lachie Whitfield type. He's going to give you exactly what you expect from Lachie Schultz. And he's actually one of the better small forwards in the competition. I think he's very underrated. So I've got to give him credit for that. And he had a very good game against the Swans. After that, we do get to the game of the year. In my opinion, I don't think anyone could really doubt how good this game was. I did get to catch the last 5 minutes, and it was some great footy. Port Adelaide looked like they were just going to fall away in that last quarter, even though they had a 3-goal lead at 3-quarter time. You just always felt like Collingwood were going to come back and give them a real shake for it. And with about 5 minutes to go, you just thought Collingwood were just about to take it away. But Port Adelaide did hold strong until Jamie Elliott got that ball in the pocket. And that ball was inbound, so I know Trent McKenzie was pretty angry at the time, but I think he was just very annoyed that he got the mark. And I think everyone in the ground kind of knew that he was going to nail it because he just flushed that kick. And Port Adelaide really do have a little bit of themselves to blame because their kicking was pretty poor. 12 goals 11 to Collingwood's 13 goals 7. They had 3 more scoring shots, and if Port Adelaide took a little bit more of their chances, maybe they could have held on. I don't think it takes anything away from Port Adelaide's performance, though. They were brilliant, and I think that they can give a real shake in the finals. But at this stage, Collingwood are the number one team at the moment, and I don't think anyone can combat that. The 3-2-1 votes, though, Collingwood don't really feature in them too much because I think they were very good all-round as a performance, but there were a couple of standouts for Port Adelaide. The 3 votes got to Willem Drew, 2 votes to Taylor Adams, and the 1 vote to Connor Rozee. Now, Willem Drew was massive against Nick Dacos. He kept in to about 20 touches, but had little to no influence on the game. He did kick a goal in the last quarter, which gave him a bit of a chance, but Drew gave him little to no marks around the ground. He was brilliant, Willem Drew, and I think maybe he hasn't had the year that he probably expected, as the majority of the Port Adelaide lineup have played brilliantly. He's probably been a little bit on the lower end, but if he can reinvent himself as like that tagger, he's definitely going to give himself a chance in this Port Adelaide lineup towards the end of the year and, finals as well. Taylor Adams with the 2 votes for the 200th game. Did get a nice little not Joe the Goose, but got a little one from Jamie Elliott to give him a gift. But Taylor Adams is very good in this game. Has been good the last few weeks as well for the Pies, so you have to give him credit there. And the 1 vote did go to Connor Rozee. He was probably Port Adelaide's, if they're giving Brownlow votes, he's probably getting the 3. I gave it to Willem Drew because I felt like he was better as a, he definitely locked the best player on the ground in Collingwood. The guy who was probably going to break the game open, he kept him under wraps. So that's why I gave him 3. But when the Brownlow, look for the most touches and that sort of stuff, the best player, I think Connor Rozee overall is probably the most, the best midfielder in the game. He had a lot more at the disposal for Port Adelaide. Port Adelaide's one of Port Adelaide's best players. I don't think I explained that very well at all, but I do think that Connor Rozee deserved a vote in this one, and hence he got the 1. After that, we get to Sunday. First game was GWS versus Gold Coast. Idiot. Anyway, this is the Giants' 6th win in a row now, and they're really pushing towards a final spot. They're playing some brilliant footy at the moment, and you could say, it was only against the Gold Coast, but if we're going to sit here and say that Carlton are pushing towards finals are going to be a threat, I think the Giants are doing playing way better football than Carlton at the moment. They are playing some good footy, beating some good teams as well. They beat the Crows last week in Adelaide Oval. They beat the Gold Coast as well. Great win. And I think Toby Green has to be talked about as the best player in the comp at the moment. I know a lot of people have mentioned this, but I think he's up there. He's no longer giving away these stupid free kicks behind the ball or punching people. And I think he's, once again, I think I mentioned this last week, but him taking the captaincy has been a huge boost to his confidence, I believe. He's playing some great footy. He did come off late in the game, I believe, but he played really well. He was subbed it was a tactical sub, I believe, though, so no injury to Toby Green, but he was brilliant when the game was there to be won, and that's why I gave him the 3 votes. Just massive. 3 goals, 4 though. If he kicked straight, he could have had a bag, but 3 goals, 4. He was influential up forward, and he's been the catalyst to this six wins on the try. He's been brilliant. 2 votes go to Harry Himmelberg, who was brilliant in defence. Interesting if they do let him go in the off-season, but if he can stay, they're building up a real good defence going into next year with players like Jack Buckley and Sam Taylor and even Connor Iden. They're building up a really good defence, and he could definitely be a part of a premiership push with the Giants. And the 1 vote I gave to Stephen Coniglio. Since he has lost the captaincy, he just feels like a free man almost. He had so much weight on his shoulders as the captain. Since he's let that go, though, he has just unleashed a new way of playing footy. He's been brilliant, and he's also playing midfield when, for some reason, for a lot of his time under Leon Cameron, he's playing a half forward, which just wasn't his position. But he's playing some good footy, and I think the Giants definitely, if they can make finals, they can be a threat because they got one of the best defensive duos in the competition. They can go up against the best of Geelong forward line with their tall forwards, and I think if they can keep going, they could definitely push towards the top 6 spot because there's definitely some teams in that top 6 around 5th or 6th who are definitely in a bit shaky spots right now. So the Giants, great team to watch at the moment, and I will be interested to see how they go next week against the Bulldogs down in Ballarat. After that, we get to Melbourne versus the Crows. Now, this game was over for about 3 quarters, and suddenly the Crows in the last quarter just really pushed, and they almost stole this game from Melbourne. Melbourne were very good until about halfway through the third quarter, and then suddenly, I think Stephen May turned it over in the back half. Yeah, he's turned it over in the back half, gifted a goal to the Crows, and since that point, Melbourne almost lost this game, and they're lucky they didn't lose it because the Crows were coming really, really hard. And I think if there was another 10 minutes in this game, they would have lost it. But this is, again, the Crows. Look, they went up against Collingwood, nearly beat them at the MCG. They still can't win away from home, the Crows, and I think that's going to cost them towards their finals push. They do have a really good run home, though. Next week, they've got the Showdown, which is going to be a massive game. But other than that, they've got a really tough run home. They've got a really easy run home. So I do give them a real chance if they can get maybe a win or two away and maybe even pull that Showdown. But other than that, again, they just fell at the final stages. But the votes we went to, Max Gawn with the 3, 2 to Isaac Rankin, and the 1 vote to Cozzy Pickett. Max Gawn, I don't know how Brodie Grundy gets back into this side. Max Gawn is the sole ruckman of this lineup, and he was massive in this game. Brilliant game from Max Gawn. Kicked a couple of goals as well. Kicked the first goal of the game, which was brilliant. And I just don't know how Brodie Grundy gets back into this team because he's not going to be able to be the sole ruckman unless Max Gawn gets an injury. He is the sole ruckman, and Brodie Grundy's not a forward. So I don't know what they do with Brodie Grundy in the off-season. But at this stage, Max Gawn is playing some brilliant footy in the past 2 weeks. Isaac Rankin with the 2 votes. He did do a hammy late in the game, which is really terrible for the Crows. But he was brilliant in this game and almost got him over the line. If he kicked straight, he may well have got him. He would have got him over the line if he nailed one of those other goals. He did kick, I think, 3 goals, 3 in the game. So a little bit disappointing. But it was the first time, and probably since he's joined the Crows this year, that he's actually played well in a game where they didn't look like winning. We saw him against Brisbane probably a couple of months ago when he played a brilliant game, and he was like one of the best players on the ground, and he does play really well when the Crows play well, but when they're under the pump, he doesn't seem to be around the ball very much. But he was very good in this one and almost got his team over the line, and the 1 vote I did give to Cozzy Pickett, who was involved in basically half the scores that Melbourne got, was very good, Cozzy Pickett, and if he can get into some form towards the end of the season, I think Melbourne can push. But at this stage, Melbourne are a little bit shaky. I think they'll make top 4 because I don't think there's any teams outside the top 4 who can make it. But I don't really give them much hopes for finals because they just can't find the forward structure that they need. And if their defence can't hold up, I mean, they conceded 28 scoring shots today, and they were lucky that the Crows didn't kick straight because they could have lost it. But yeah, if Melbourne's defence don't hold up, I don't think their forward line can get them and score high enough to beat a lot of teams. So I think Melbourne have some work to do. They did enough to win against the Crows, but they almost lost it in the end. And speaking of nearly losing, St Kilda versus North Melbourne in the final game of the round. St Kilda kicked 9 goals, 15, and were very, very lucky to pull this game. At 3/4 time, they were down by just under 3 goals, and it looked like North Melbourne were going to finally pull a win under Brett Ratton. But they froze up in the end and St Kilda ran over the top of them. However, they had to start kicking straight. I think they kicked 5-2 in the last quarter, which got them over the line against North Melbourne. And I don't think St Kilda make finals. I think they're going to really choke at the end. They are not competing against these teams that they should be beating well. This is against the 17th place team in the competition. And they have probably been the worst. They would be the worst team in the comp if it wasn't for the fact that the VFL team and West Coast are still lined up as an AFL squad, which I don't think is really fair to the rest of the comp. But they got very lucky, St Kilda, and they win a couple of games this year, even against West Coast. What I think of 3 weeks ago, they nearly lost it. So they're playing really bad footy, and they've got a pretty weird run home. So I don't give St Kilda a lot of credit here. I do think that they had a couple of midfielders like Steele, Crouch, Jack Sinclair as well, who have been standing up lately. But they've got to find a way to do something in this last 5 weeks of the season, because if they don't make finals, I think it is a pretty big loss. Even though I don't think at the start of the season many people saw them making it, they've been sitting in the 8 for the majority of the year. If they lose their top 8 spot after having it for 20-odd rounds, I think that's pretty disappointing for Saints fans out there. But nonetheless, the last votes of the round, we gave 3 votes to Jack Steele, 2 votes to Davies Uniacke, and the 1 vote to Rowan Marshall. Jack Steele, I'm really pissed off about because I had him in my AFL Fantasy team. He played like he was injured, and in the last 2 weeks he's played like, I don't know what he's taken, but suddenly he's got no injury worries anymore. But nonetheless, he is leading the team from the front, and that's good to see for Jack Steele. I don't really know what he does for. I don't think he can get him over the line every week though, because he doesn't score a lot of goals. I think he was very good though in the defensive side of the game, and I think they need to get some more help in there in the midfield in the off season, because it just seems like he's doing a one man job. Well, him and Brad Crouch right now are really the only 1-2 punch, and they're very one paced. So I think they need to fix that up in the off season. The 2 votes went to, like I said, Davies Uniacke. He was very good in this game. I just think that if I'm another club right now, I'm talking to him and just asking if you want to move clubs, because he is a massive... If he's in a top 8 team right now, he makes them so much better. And he's playing really good footy for North Melbourne, but he doesn't have many coming with him, and it's very disappointing. And Rowan Marshall, I still think he's very underrated as a ruckman. I don't think he's been talked about a lot. And, he was very good in this one as well. Arguably is carrying them in the midfield, really. I think that he's helping their midfielders a lot in there. And I don't think... I know there was a little bit of talk. I think it was like a thing that was on SEN from David King talking about, is he there for the next premiership? I don't know if that's the case, but I don't think that he should be moved on, because I think he's one of the best ruckmen in the comp, and I think he just helps their midfield out so much, especially because they're so young at the moment. But yeah, guys, that is my review of round 19. Big round it was. And now we get to round 20. We'll get to the tips now. And we start on Friday night with one of the oldest rivalries in football, Collingwood versus Carlton. What a game this will be. Carlton are in some very good form, beating some lowly opponents. I'll just say that right now. But they're coming up against the best team in the comp in Collingwood. And I think right now, this is where the streak ends, and it's going to end miserably. I think Collingwood come to this game and beat Carlton pretty convincingly. I think that Carlton are going to face a real reality check on where they are, and I think Collingwood are the ones to deal it out. This is going to be at least... The thing is, Collingwood don't tend to flog teams very much. They do have a good percentage, but it just doesn't feel like Collingwood really come out and burn teams very often. So I'm going to be picking Collingwood by about 30 points here. I think I'll win this one pretty convincingly, and I think Carlton are going to get a real reality check going into the last 4 weeks of the season. After that, we get to Saturday afternoon, Geelong versus Fremantle. And this is down at Cardinia Park, which automatically gives you Geelong the win here. I'm sorry, but Geelong down there win every day against a team like Fremantle, who are in pretty poor form at the moment. Fremantle are very disappointing. They are sitting 15th spot, just away from a team they're away from Hawthorn, that is a team that was talked about tanking at the start of the season. They're away from North Melbourne, who have been the worst team in the competition for the last 2 or 3 years. And then they've got West Coast, who are playing like a VFL side. So Fremantle aren't exactly sitting in great company there, and they're playing some woeful footy, and it's not going to help much more, because Geelong at home will crush Fremantle. And this is the thing. I mean, everyone will be talking about how Geelong is such a great club, this time next week when they beat Fremantle by 80 points or whatever, or 50 points. But it's not convincing anyone. It's not convincing me anyway. They won't make the top 4, and they have not been able to compete against a top 4 side, really, this season. They do have Port Adelaide in a couple of weeks, which will be very interesting to see how they go. But they're not good. I don't think they're really giving me much to talk about at the moment. Anyway, next up we get to the Bulldogs versus Giants, and this is a massive game. I think this is one of the games of the round. If anything, it's second game of the round, really, behind the showdown to me. This is going to be a big game. And it's a little bit disappointing that it's down in Ballarat. I mean, good on the Ballarat people to get this game. But this game is finals. This is a finals game, really. If the Bulldogs lose this one, I think that they could potentially fall out of the top 8. Just on the fact that they've got a pretty low percentage, and there are teams biting at the bit just to get to that position. They've got teams like the Crows, Sydney, Essendon, Crows, Sydney, and Carlton, all with high percentage over the Bulldogs. And they've also got teams like Essendon and Richmond, Essendon, even though they've only won one of their past 5 games, they do have a very good run home. I think they've got West Coast and North Melbourne still to go, so they're automatic wins. And Richmond are in pretty good form at the moment, and they have a pretty good run home. So the Bulldogs really need to win this game. But the Giants, I think they need a little bit more, and they're playing some good footy. I don't know if they can win this one, though, because it's down in Ballarat. This is such a hard game for them, because if this was at Marvel, I'd actually be tipping the Giants. But because it's at Ballarat, it's so weird conditions. It's very cold. It's very windy. I'm going to give it to the Bulldogs. But nonetheless, I'd really love to see a great game out of these two. And it's kind of a bad time slot as well. But nonetheless, big game for both those clubs. After that, we get to the Q Clash, Gold Coast versus Brisbane. I'd just like to see a contest from the Gold Coast in the Q Clash. I think we got a little bit more of a contest last time, but I don't know. The Gold Coast just never seem to compete against the Brisbane Lions. I know they're in very different stages of their development, but this isn't a rivalry until they compete, the Gold Coast. And at this stage, the Gold Coast kind of know now that their finals hopes are gone. So I think Brisbane will be looking to win this one pretty convincingly and be pushing for that top 2 spot, which now they're only 1 game behind Port Adelaide. So really big for both those Brisbane to get this win and really push towards that top 2. After that, we get to Essendon versus Sydney. This is a big game as well because both these teams, whoever loses it, I think could be out... it won't be really out of the race if Essendon lose. But if Essendon do lose, they're going to find it very difficult to make that 8th spot because if Sydney win, they've got 2 points on them and they have already... not that the percentage really matters because of those 2 points, but they do have good percentage as well, the Swans. So Essendon, this is almost a must-win game for them because they're going to be able to beat North Melbourne and West Coast. But if they want to hold that final 8 spot with teams like the Giants and Geelong and Carlton, those 3 teams that are sitting 7th, 8th and 9th, they are playing some good footy at the moment. Essendon are not. So Essendon, this is a must-win game for them at home, and I am going to tip them. However, Sydney have found a little bit of form in the past few weeks, and if Sydney can hit some rich vein of form towards the end of the season, who knows? I still don't think the Swans can make the finals. I think that they have made their run a little bit too late. However, they have won 3 of their past 5 games, and one of them was and the one that they didn't win was also a draw against Geelong, which they really should have won. So really, they've been the better team in 4 of their past 5 games. So I give the Swans a bit of a chance here, but I just think that the Bombers at home, they've been in a bit of bad form at the moment. I just think that they can just get over the line against the Swans. After that, we get to the match of the round, and it's again Port Adelaide up against the Crows at Adelaide Oval. Obviously, the showdown. This needs to be talked about a lot more because this game is going to be massive. It may read on the ladder 13th against 2nd, but this game is a lot more than that. I come from Adelaide, of course, and this is big. If the Crows win this game, they actually give themselves a real chance towards pushing towards finals. But if Port Adelaide win it, this is why it's so big, because if Port Adelaide win it, this will be a lot more on their hands because they knocked their rivals out of the finals race, and that would be big for them. But if the Crows can win, not only do they get themselves back in the finals race, but it potentially knocks their rivals out of the top 2 spot. So that's why this game is so massive for both clubs. I'm going to pick Port Adelaide. They've lost their last 2 games. I'll give them a mulligan against Carlton. And look, they were very good against Collingwood, just got pipped at the post. I think against a lesser side like the Crows, I think Port Adelaide can win. However, in saying that, Crows match up a lot better on Port Adelaide than a lot of clubs do because Port Adelaide do struggle against the big forwards of the competition because they've got quite a short forward line. So having players like Phil Thorpe, who had a massive game in the showdown last time, Taylor Walker is in pretty good form, and Darcy Fogarty as well, the Crows do match up very well, but I just give Port Adelaide a little bit more of a win here just because I think they're a better side, which on paper it kind of suggests that being second on the ladder. And then we get to Sunday, Hawthorn versus St Kilda. Boy, is this a big game for the Saints. They are playing some woeful footy at the moment. And I've been swapping and changing this tip for a couple of minutes. And to be honest, I'm actually going to switch it again. St Kilda are in such bad form. Can I edit this? Yeah, I can edit this. Okay. I'm going to edit this quickly and pick Hawthorn over the Saints because I just think this is it for the Saints. They're starting to fall into... They're free falling out of the 8 right now. And they were very lucky to get that win against North Melbourne late. But they're not playing good footy at all. They don't have Max King up there, obviously. He's injured. They're not playing anywhere near to the standard finals that they need. They've won 2 of their past 5 games, and their wins have been against West Coast and North Melbourne. So they may be coming up against the 16th team, which is Hawthorn. However, I think Hawthorn are a step above those 2, and I think Hawthorn will get them. And they did actually get them, about 6 or 7 weeks ago, Hawthorn beat them. So I think Hawthorn will win this game. And I think St Kilda will be free falling out of the 8 and potentially falling under... They could fall in the next couple of weeks, if St Kilda don't start to win a few games, they could fall right down to 14th on the ladder. Now, I don't think they'll fall that far down, but falling down from basically in the top 5, a couple of weeks ago when they beat the Swans, to potentially falling all the way down to 14th on the ladder would be an absolute embarrassment for them. So I don't think they'll fall that far down, but they potentially could if they play the way they are in the past fortnight. Next we get to Sunday afternoon, Richmond versus Melbourne. Big game for both clubs as well. Richmond kind of have to win this game to keep themselves in touch with the 8. But Melbourne, they're not in the best of form at the moment. They have won their past 3 games. But before then, they weren't playing good footy at all. They were able to beat St Kilda a couple of weeks ago as well. And then they were able to beat the Crows just. But because Melbourne, I just think are just a better team, I'm going to be picking Melbourne. However, I wouldn't be too surprised if Richmond were able to get them here. And if Richmond do, they get themselves right back in the finals race. Like I said, though, their problem is their percentage, and having 2 teams like Carlton and Geelong pushing for those final spots with draws, their percentage is actually going to matter a little bit. However, I think that if Richmond can get this game, that does give them a real chance with the final, end of the season push. And then finally we get to the game of... No, sorry guys, I've been all wrong this whole time. The game of the round is the final game of the round 20, which is West Coast versus North Melbourne. And if you're a North Melbourne fan, you are licking your lips because this is basically your only chance to get a win for the rest of the season. You've won 2 games this season. You've been pretty poor, let's be real. You haven't really done much better than you did last year. It's only because there's a team called West Coast Eagles down in bloody WA that are playing so bad that you were going to get a win here. North Melbourne will win this game. It may be in Perth. I don't care. They win this game and they win this one by a couple of... they'll win this one by 3 or 4 goals. I think Nick Larkey will have a day out. I don't know if Tom Barrass will be in this team next week. And that's another... No, we're not going to go into that. I was going to talk about how Charlie Kerner didn't get 10 goals against a forward. But whatever. Doesn't matter. Nick Larkey will have a day out. North Melbourne will get a win here, and they'll push another win away from West Coast. And West Coast season goes from bad to worse. They'll lose this one pretty convincingly, and I don't think they should be. I know it's a big statement, and maybe it's a little bit clickbaity, but I think they should just take West Coast out of the competition for the rest of the season and give every single team in the comp a 60-point win. Like 120 to 60, so they get double the percentage, and they get a win. I think they should just do that, honestly. I think that, they couldn't, but, because it would just give an advantage. Well, it wouldn't exactly give them an advantage because of having, a bye, essentially. But at this point, West Coast are not fair to the competition. They are not. It's unfair for them to be able to be in the competition and just have teams have them walloped every single week. It's pathetic. But anyway, guys, that is my tips for this week. So finally, we get to the AFL Fantasy segment of the podcast. And I had a pretty poor week, to be honest with you. I got 2,248, which is a pretty poor week for my standards. I've done pretty well this year, but really in the past few weeks, I've actually dropped off really convincingly, and I'm not really impressed with myself. My captain in Jordan Dawson had a really bad first half. He only got 32 to half time, but then he got 97 in the end. So he got about 65, so... I think it's 65. I think I'm right there. But yeah, that was a little bit disappointing. At the start of the round, I should have put my vice-captain on Marcus Bontempelli, but I put it on Zach Merritt, which, isn't exactly dumb, but Marcus Bontempelli has definitely been in some really good form, so I should have put it on him and got him as captain, but that was my mistake, and I have to live with it. But nonetheless, I had a pretty good week all round. I had a lot of hundreds. Ben Hobbs I have to get rid of... very soon. I'm probably going to get rid of him I'll put it up on the screen because the trades aren't out yet. I just had to do this a little bit earlier this week. So I'll put the trades up on the screen. But I'm going to have to get rid of Ben Hobbs this week, and then I'll probably get either Sam Flanders or if I can get a little bit higher, I'll try to go for a premium player. But at this stage, it's probably going to be Sam Flanders because he's been in good form for the Gold Coast. And I'll probably get rid of one of my reserves for a lower reserve just to get some cash back for the last few weeks going into the finals. But yeah, guys, that is my AFL Fantasy talk for the week. That is all I really have for you in this podcast. Don't quote me on this, but I'm going to try and get it on Spotify because I think that, podcasts it's obviously an audio medium. It should be on Spotify at least. I'm going to try and get it on there. I think it costs a bit, so I'll try and get it on there at least. And it may just be like the last 5 episodes, but I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who would rather listen to a podcast than have me talk and then on screen with just a couple of graphics that really aren't that impressive. But yeah, I'm going to try and get that done. We will be doing another trade rumors video in the next couple of days as well, so make sure to check that one out. Thanks for watching the 21st episode of the Boundary Riders Podcast. That's all from me, so I'll catch you all next time.